is the first black man to reintroduce the belief in one God in ancient Kemet. The belief in one God is African. It doesn't come from Christianity. It doesn't come from Islam. It doesn't come from the Hebrews. It comes from the Africans of the Nile Valley, the first people God put down here on earth. This is Pharaoh Akhenaten, King Tut's father-in-law. King Tut was married to one of the children fathered by Pharaoh Akhenaten and his wife Nefertari, not to be confused with Queen Nefertiti. This black man wrote a book of Psalms, the Psalms of Akhenaten, that many biblical scholars believe are the Psalms of David. They say the Psalms of David in the Bible are word for word identical to the Psalms of Akhenaten, so many people believe that the Psalms of David in the Bible were plagiarized. Does that have anything to do with your religion? Nope. We're just talking about one text that had been modified and played with. For example, in the 5 books of Moses, we know that Genesis was the last of the 5 to be written. So if it was one of the last of the 5 to be written, how could it have been the first book? Study your history, please. You don't have to give up your religion, but you may have to give up your version of it. Why do most African kings and queens wear a king cobra right here on the third eye? Why is the king cobra right there at the pineal gland? Because if I take your brain out of your skull, your brain will be attached to your spinal cord. The human brain is in the shape of the head of a cobra. The spinal cord is in the shape of the body of the cobra. The cobra represents African intelligence. Your intelligence is not just your brain, it is also your spine. That's where we get the spiritual chakra system, 7 vortexes that are cerebral and spinal in nature, through which the universe communicates with you. Also, the snake is a reptile. Reptiles have one of the largest pineal glands in all of creation. The pineal gland works with the pituitary to secrete the chemical that makes your skin black. So that snake also represents pride and black skin. And thirdly, the ancient Africans taught that your spirit is coiled up at the base of your spine 3.5 times. And in order for you to reach God consciousness, you have to force your spirit up through the chakras and through your pineal. Your spirit must merge with the soul of the universe, and that's how you reach God consciousness. That's why when you look at most of the kings and queens, they were often painted while they sat in their chairs with their hands on their lap, because they were in trance, in meditation. Meditation don't come from the Chinese people, and it don't come from the East Indian people. It comes from African people. They simply borrowed it. For example, it is largely believed by African scholars that Buddha, whose name means the black face, one of the greatest thinkers and masters of psychology to have ever lived, was an African priest who went into exile from Egypt into Asia during the invasion of outsiders. Here is a statue representing one of the first groups of people to live here in North America, Central America, South America. The Pilgrims were not first. The Native Americans were not first. You were. First people in America were Africans. This is a statue of the Olmec people, O-L-M-E-C. Look at the nose, look at the lips, look at the hairstyle, mohawk. African people are the only ones whose hair stands on top of their head. Shave his hair, and you have an ancestor of Jay-Z. There's another Olmec brother right here. Look at the lips, look at the nose, look at the haircut. Africans right here. You're the first people everywhere. Who were the first people in Europe? The Africans called the Grimaldi, who migrated between 20 and 40,000 years ago. And in the context of the extreme cold and climate, much colder than anything you've ever seen since the Ice Age, they lost the ability to produce significant amounts of pigmentation. White folks have pigmentation. You can't be alive without it. They have it, but they don't have significant amounts of it. They lost that ability. What happens in extreme measure, extreme cold, what happens to your lips? They freeze. What happens to your nose? It freezes. What happens to your nostrils? They constrict. So over thousands of years, guess what? Their lips got thin, their nose got thin, their nostrils got smaller because they didn't need it. White folk are the children of black folk. Asian folk are the children of black folk. Everybody come from you. The first people in China were Africans. The Shang dynasty of China, the greatest of them all, totally black. The founder of the ninja military code, an African. The samurai, also founded by an African. Study your history. Mary and Jesus, Immaculate Conception. God impregnating a woman and giving birth to a son, that's nothing new. That story existed in Africa 20,000 years before Jesus was born. Nor was he the first famous person to wear the title Christ. Christ is a title, it's not a name. Here's a statue of the original Mary and Jesus. You got Set, who the Greeks called Isis, Haru, which the Greeks called Horus, and Asaru, who the Greeks called Osiris. Mother, born of Immaculate Conception. God, represented as the sun. Why did the Africans use the sun to represent God as opposed to the moon and star of the Muslims, which they borrowed from the Adinkra symbolism of Ghana? Or the cross of the Christians, which they borrowed from the Ankh of Kemet? They use the sun because the whole universe revolves around the sun. There is no life without the sun. No vegetation. No water. No vitamin D that you need to activate your melanin. Without the sun, there's no life. It's the most powerful thing in the universe that we know of. And as a result of that, Africans use the sun to represent God. What did the scientists just found out a couple years ago? They said the essential substance of the universe is something invisible that we refer to as dark matter. They said every atom of dark matter has millions of universes within it. They said our whole approach to understanding the universe has been totally wrong because you can't understand the universe without understanding dark matter. Oil, carbon, the most powerful substances in creation are all black. So why do we hate our blackness? Here's a picture of Abraham Lincoln, a cartoon drawn of him by the Democratic Party when he was running to be the Republican nominee for president. Why does Abraham Lincoln have an afro and a beard? Because he was of African origin. This was put in newspapers. White folks knew that he was half black. In fact, there's a book that was written, if you can find it, entitled Abraham Lincoln's Secret Dark Past, put out by the Democratic Party, talking about how this man was really a black man. Yes?
When you actually look at him, though, you see his features, you can tell, like, there's some, I was thinking he was mixed with, like, Native American or something.
Exactly. In fact, an original painting of Abraham Lincoln, he's darker than Barack Obama in complexion. That's why when you look at most of your presidents, do you see original pictures or do you see paintings? You see paintings, because original pictures will show you how nappy their hair really were. Those paintings that you see are white wigs. Just like over in Britain now, the judges in the court wear white wigs. And speaking of judges, why do judges wear black robes? Why when you graduate do you wear a black robe? Why do the ministers wear long black robes? Because at the University of the Mystery Systems in Kemet, all the priests and priestesses and initiates had to wear black long robes. When you came into the temple, you had to first cleanse yourself. You had to wash your hands 3 times, your face 3 times, your feet 3 times, your arms 3 times. The Muslims thinks Muhammad invented that. Muhammad didn't invent that. We've been washing ourselves when we entered into holy temples, taking our shoes off. Judges represent righteousness. That's the black robe. The minister's supposed to represent godliness. That's the black robe. The graduate's supposed to represent intellectual pursuit and development. That's the black robe. That's an African tradition. Please read the book Stolen Legacy. Stolen Legacy, you must read it. George James. I once had a 2-hour debate with my psychology, history, and systems professor on whether or not psychology came from white folk or whether it came from black folk. We spent the whole class period debating. Do you know why? Because when I got up to do my history of psychology report, I showed the African origin of psychology, and that white man lost his mind. He stopped the whole class and we went at it pound for pound. And that's probably why it took me 3 years extra to get my doctorate degree, because they said, how dare you? But I gave him the proof. I gave him a picture of Sigmund Freud's office, the father of white psychology. And in Sigmund Freud's office, what did he have? Statues of all the African deities. Paintings of all the great African monuments. Why would a Jewish white psychologist be so infatuated with ancient Egyptian art? Because he was studying the spiritual system. The psychoanalysis of Sigmund Freud is nothing but the spirituality of the Nile Valley culture. In fact, the word psyche is an African word that meant study of the spirit. But the Europeans corrupted it and made it study of the mind. And that's why white psychology can help black folk, because white psychology does not acknowledge the existence of soul. And we are soul people, which is why the black psychologists are going to have to stop carbon copying the white psychologists and come up with a serious treatment paradigm for black folk, because we are mentally sick as hell. The fact that so many black women spend a greater portion of their disposable incomes on hair so they can look like their oppressor is ridiculous. The fact that the greater portion of educated black men can't wait to find a white woman is symptomatic of mental illness. And I best not catch no brother in here, even if your mom is white, which I respect, you're going to marry a black woman. And black women, you're going to marry a black man. It is not an option. You're either loyal to your race or you're loyal to your enemy. You can't do both. Statue of Liberty was originally a black woman. And here's the sketch. It was a gift to the United States of America from France, but the United States rejected the offer. And that's why you see a white woman standing in the harbor of New York, but she still has shackles at the feet. The statue was originally supposed to show respect to the African woman in particular, but all enslaved Africans who had suffered and died to make America what it is. You built America. Don't you ever let nobody make you feel that you're an insignificant factor. There would be no America without you. Not just slavery either. I'm talking about 85% of all the inventions in this country prior to the Civil Rights Bill came out of the mind of black folk. We all have a cell phone. A black man invented it. We all love surfing on the internet. A black man invented it. Helicopters, most of your modern machines. Do you know that it was a black man? Elijah McCoy in Granville Woods, too, in particular, who had a lot of other inventions, but also modernized American hand arms, guns, rifles, and weapons. In fact, I was watching a comic movie one day. What was the movie about the white comic character? They made a movie out of the guy. He had two guns on his hand.
That was a dance flick.
No. It was one of the Marvel comics. What is the name of that movie? I don't know if you guys remember it. He used to ride horses. He was a comic superhero. Not Superman and none of them, but this guy had guns. He rode a horse, and he had guns on his hand.
Was it Ghost Rider?
Nah. I can't remember. But anyway, in the movie, it's like, white folks know black people history. He stopped and gave a whole history lesson on how either Granville Woods or Elijah McCoy, I forget which name he used. He said this man, he didn't say he was black though. He didn't say he was black. He said this man revolutionized modern warfare for the United States. He said if it wasn't for this man, the weapons that we use, the military technology would not be what it was. Now black folk watching the movie wouldn't even know he talking about a black man because they don't know his history. White folk know black folk history. For example, November 11th, 1831, Nat Turner, leader of the bloodiest and scariest slave revolt in American history, was hung. November 11th, 31. How about November 11/11? A couple months ago, white folks released a movie called 11/11/11. And guess who the name of the boy was in the movie? Nathaniel. They always give you your history back in movies. Symbolism. The movies are used to educate illiterate white folk about what the government is planning next for black people. That's why a lot of what you see in movies tends to come true, because the movie is a codified communication system for the government to let white folk know what we're about to do to black folk so you can be on guard. Hurricane Katrina, that was already put in the movie. Rodney King Rebellion, that was already put in the movie. HIV/AIDS, that was put in the movie. Ebola, that was put in the movie. Every significant social issue affecting black people was first hinted to white folk so they would know, we got this. This ain't about y'all, it's about the blacks. So the next time you go to the movies, start deciphering the symbols instead of laughing at the nonsense.